with you, please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. That would be appreciated. Officiating at the service is Rabbi Adam Shalom from Kol Hadash Humanistic Congregation.
We are at the end of an era for the Seeley family. Less than 8 months ago, we gathered in this space to say goodbye to Bob. And today we say goodbye to Bob's wife of over 70 years. Of course, Aileen was more than just Bob's wife. She was a focused and devoted mother. She was a loving grandmother, a talented travel agent, a creative crafter, and more. Again and again, the family shared with me how generous she was, how she gave to each person what they wanted or needed, how she thought of others more than herself. Well, often, if not always. When she was thinking of those she loved, she thought of her children, Paul and Karen, and Warren and Ellen, and their spouses, Iris and Karen and John. She thought of her grandchildren, Sean, Ariel, Leah, Haley, Caleb, Olivia, Miranda, and Bridget, and their partners as well. And of course, she did have the chance to experience great-grandchildren with Oren and Itai, JJ, Sadie, and Asher. I'd like to begin this memorial service with a poem that speaks of learning the lesson of generosity. It's not in your booklet. You'll just have to listen, but I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants it later. It's entitled Epitaph by Merritt Malloy. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men who wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known and loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So, when all that's left of me is love, give me away. Throughout her life, Aileen was creative. She sewed, she knitted, she beaded. She was always making art in many media. She sewed matching high holiday dresses for her daughters Ellen and Karen, as well as bat mitzvah and graduation dresses. And she made food for her family, baking sweets, cooking for a month or more to be ready for those legendary Thanksgiving gatherings. Aileen was fastidious about her recipes, keeping them organized in dozens of notebooks with page protectors, although she was not secretive or possessive about them. When her granddaughter Haley got into baking, Aileen made her a book of personal recipes. Now, there's an old cliche that for Jewish mothers and grandmothers, food equals love. There's no doubt at all that Aileen loved her family and that they loved and still love her. That recipe, the recipe for love, she got down for sure. And maybe from her example, we can learn some of the key ingredients of a lasting and loving relationship. One ingredient for love is coming from a loving family. Aileen was born in 1929 in Chicago. Her parents were Leonard and Amy, and she had a sister Joanne who was a couple of years older. During Aileen's childhood, Leonard was a salesman for the Remington Rand Typewriter Company, starting in 1932, while Amy was mostly a housewife, though she also volunteered, including at the blind service. Now, one way you show your family you love them is that you celebrate them. Milestone birthdays, milestone events were always celebrated, And Aileen had a big family with her mother's 3 brothers and their children, so there was always lots of extended family at those celebrations growing up and at her celebrations throughout her life. In later years, Aileen became a very good caretaker to her parents, talking with her mother every day, even though it became a bit more challenging when she and Bob moved out to the suburbs. Evidently, in the days of long-distance telephone call bills, her mother would call and then she would call right back because the call to the suburbs was more expensive than a call within the city, those who remember area codes and all that. She did talk to her mother every day, even with that challenge. Growing up, Eileen's nuclear family lived in a 2-room apartment for a time near Montrose and Western. They were financially stable but working class, and so much so that she was impressed when she first met Bob for their first date and he picked her up in his car, even if the passenger door was so dented that she had to crawl in through the driver's door to get to her seat. That's another important ingredient for loving relationships, is finding the right partner and setting up the right home base. Eileen attended University of Illinois' Navy Pier campus for a year, and she also attended a teacher's college, worked briefly for a liquor company, but her adult life really started when she connected with Bob. They met when she was 19, and they were married when she was age 20 in 1949. And then came the kids. She had always wanted 2 boys and 2 girls, and that's what she got. A new one every 2 years until she was 28. She was proud that for all 4 of her naturally born children, she used no anesthesia at all. In 1959, 10 years after marriage, they moved to Deerfield, and they found their lifetime home in Deerfield at 540 Carriage Way. The next year, they became founding members of Congregation Beth-Or, initially a Reformed congregation. She was involved in the Beth-Or sisterhood for quite a long time, and they bonded with many Beth-Or families when the kids were young. It was a big social scene for them. Growing up, Eileen had attended Temple Sholem as a child, and her parents would occasionally speak a few words of Yiddish when they wanted to try to keep a secret. Now, Eileen didn't like to drive places generally, and she was quite the leadfoot when she did drive, but she never minded driving to Sunday school. She even taught 2nd grade in Sunday school for a time. That was their home base for everything. Beth-Or, Deerfield, Carriage Way. Theirs was a lifetime partnership. Eileen had dinner on the table every night when Bob got home, and in later years, Bob was effusively complimentary. How beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how she was the best mother, the best decision he ever made, and would she please stop moving around dealing with things and just sit down with him on the couch? Just because they were lifetime partners doesn't mean that everything was always sweetness and light. Both Eileen and Bob were type A personalities. They were driven and strong-willed, and so they would sometimes clash. They were both serious about being parents, put their children above themselves, but they could definitely disagree between each other. She would go out on Saturday mornings to get her hair done, for example, often taking one or more of the kids with her, and if she were annoyed at Bob from a recent interaction, at this hair appointment she would smoke a cigarette and tell the kids, "Don't tell Dad." They never argued about money, which worked out well if she wanted to buy a gift for someone or more clothing or jewelry for herself. For Eileen, and for many of us, love meant doing things for other people. When she was hosting, she was always in motion with nervous energy. She had high standards for herself in service of others. She would start preparing for Thanksgiving in October, sometimes even in August, to bake and freeze and have it ready in advance, and then everything would be defrosted for the meal, sometimes having 10 different kinds of cookies and cakes, especially her ladyfingers cake. Now, to be fair, she was not a fan of making school lunches. So what she would do is assembly line fashion, make all the week's lunches on a Sunday for the whole week, and then put them in the freezer. And so then in the morning, she would drop one in the lunchbox, and hopefully, not always, it would defrost by it was lunchtime and time for the children to eat them. Those Thanksgivings, those major birthdays, they were major affairs. And she was the event planner, the organizer behind them all, demonstrating her organizational skills and executive skills. She even knew that Warren's wife, Karen, loved the combination of chocolate and mint, and she always made sure to have something special for her. Doing things for others was also expressed when her grandchildren arrived. Aileen always came right away to help out the parents and the baby wherever they were. Ariel made her a grandmother, and Eileen's help in that was invaluable. When Karen had Haley, Aileen came right out to New York to help, and to Michigan when Bridget was born. When Ellen's son Sean was born, Bob and Aileen had a trip planned with Paul and Iris, I believe, on the Orient Express. And he delayed, and finally Sean arrived the day before they had to leave. Was she relieved? As a grandma, Aileen would send care packages when her kids were in college, sending brownies, blondies cut very small with a note, and generally something for Valentine's Day, too. When Aileen started beading, she sent them bracelets or necklaces, and sometimes they would all get the same style because that was the style she was working on at that time. But she would also make you something that you liked, or once Ariel bought neat beads for her and she made the necklace out of those specific beads. Olivia, her granddaughter, still wears the jewelry that Aileen made, and we're told there's more coming as the estate gets distributed. And Haley remembers Eileen's support of her interest in music. She would buy an album of an artist that Haley liked just to listen and connect with her on her own terms. Aileen was always there for her grandchildren for dance recitals and graduations, in addition to those Thanksgivings and also the July 4th parties, complete with parades and fireworks. And when they finally had to leave Carriageway in the last couple years, cleaning out the house revealed a treasure trove of every graduation program, invitation to special events, saved mementos of accomplishments about the people she loved. She was sentimental. And then there were the wonderful family trips she organized. In 1988, a trip to Disneyland with all the grandkids. A trip to Maine in 1999 for her and Bob's 50th anniversary. And for each of the 8 grandchildren, she made a special zipper case with a notepad and a pen that was custom for them with their initials. And then in 2001, a wonderful trip to the Cayman Islands over Thanksgiving. Maybe that year she decided, enough cooking, let's take a vacation instead. After all, just because you love other people and do lots for them doesn't mean you can't have something for yourself. Aileen lived through the experience of women's liberation, and as her kids got older and left, she developed even more of an identity for herself. Aileen began working as a travel agent in the early 1970s. Her company's slogan was, "See the world before you leave it." And she certainly did. When Karen was in Europe and France and Italy, they traveled to see her and also went for other tourism opportunities when they were there. Bob went for the food and for the culture and the history, and she enjoyed everything. She got to take many what they called fam trips, or familiarize yourself trips, as a travel agent to discover the places you would be recommending to your clients. Sometimes she went with Bob, but often she went without him. She went to China. She went to Russia. She went to Australia twice. She had the chance to experience independence, to be her own person. She had her own bank account. And she liked to be able to say, "I bought this with my own money." Those Saturdays after Thanksgivings, it was time for shopping. Sometimes many stores, a stop at Michael's for lunch during the trip. And even when she was less mobile, she would go out to, even if it was just one store, she had to go out once on that day. When her granddaughter Leah was growing quickly under growth hormone treatment, Aileen took her shopping for clothes and then would help her sneak the clothes into the house by taking off the tags and hiding the bags. But occasionally on those outings, she would buy something for herself too. She once even bought herself a fur coat on that outing. Aileen also had quite the sweet tooth, always a candy stash everywhere. And even with Alzheimer's near the end, she recognized the cover of a box from a special candy store that was meaningful to her. On those Saturdays at the hairdresser's and then shopping at Old Orchard, she often stopped at Joseph's Shoes. And one of the seamstresses there turned out to be a cousin of hers named Herta, who had been in the Theresian ghetto concentration camp, and her parents had helped get Herta and her parents out And Herta was the one who made Eileen's dress for Ellen's wedding. As Aileen got older, she did pretty well into her 80s. For her 80th birthday, they took the family in a stretch Hummer limo to the Four Seasons. And she kept on doing Thanksgiving with great effort, even as she began to slow down. She would start cooking even earlier in the fall to be ready. After all, she did not like people telling her what she could do with food, what she could do or could not do in the kitchen. Even as they had caregivers coming into the house, she did not want to be told what to do or what not to do. She remained strong-willed, even stubborn. Now, it must be said that she could definitely hold a grudge, even against her sister. Though later in life she thought better of it and encouraged her daughters to do better with each other. Her knees began giving out. I remember a knee replacement surgery. She could no longer visit New York a couple of times a year after her 80s. And then around 2019, the Alzheimer's began to accelerate. And yet, even in her last months at Arbor Terrace, she made positive and loving connections with her caregivers. And her family's love for her continued. Paul handled her legal and financial matters, and Ellen seemingly handled just about everything else, visiting every day, managing her care. They each deserve thanks, though Paul told me that Ellen deserves the lion's share. Even near the end, Aileen had glimpses of clarity. She said the week before she died, "Today is not the day." And when she could eat chocolate, she was still happy. What recipe do all these ingredients make? A good life, a loving family, a warm feeling when we remember her. We are sad that Eileen's life is finally ended. But in the big picture, to live to age 95, to live in your own home well into your 80s, to live with your life partner over 70 years of marriage, to have so many people who love you and remember you for all that you did for them, and that have so many ways to remember you with all the things that you gave to them as a sign of your love. All those memories of Thanksgivings and July 4ths, the gifts and generosity and caring and love she expressed in so many ways. It's not tragic. It's sad. But we have many ways to know that she loved us, and many ways to know that we loved her. For the Seeley family, we now live in a new world. It's a world without Bob, without Aileen. We might have started to get used to a life without 540 Carriage Way. But now it's a new world. It's a world none of the Seeley family has ever experienced. And so it will take some time to get our feet under us, to feel like the world isn't spinning faster than normal. And this is why we need each other, and why we have each other. The best gift that Aileen gave was that of a loving family, so that even when she and Bob are gone, the family still has each other. I would like to ask, if you're comfortable standing for a moment, if you could please rise. As I read each line of this poem, I invite you to respond together with the words, "We remember her." In the rising of the sun and in its going down, together, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of the buds and in the warmth of summer, we remember her. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. So long as we live, Aileen Seeley too shall live, for she is now a part of us as, together, we remember her. Let us pause for a moment of silent tribute in memory and in love of Aileen Seeley. In the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Proverbs, we read, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. The memory of a good person is a blessing to us, and so may it be. Please be seated.
The interment will take place at Shalom Memorial Park, located in Arlington Heights. And for those of you that are driving to the cemetery, we'll make sure that you receive an orange funeral sticker that should be placed on the inside of the front windshield, as well as a magnetic flag for the top of your car. And the family has provided for a limousine if there's any people that need transportation to the cemetery. Please see one of us, the directors, before you leave today. The Shiva will be observed at the Finnegan Residence at 1322 Oxford Road in Deerfield today from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. This address is listed also in the service folder you received. At this time, I'll ask Mrs. Seeley's grandchildren to please step forward to help be pallbearers to escort her casket from the chapel. And everyone, please rise at this time. If you're going to the cemetery, folks, you can go directly to your cars. Again, there